Good morning, everyone. Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 8:30 a.m. Central Time on Saturday, October 21st, 2023. The IDF put out yesterday that Hamas has now fired over 6,900 rockets from inside of Gaza towards Israeli territory since October 7th. They added a new statistic here saying that includes 450 failed launches, which is likely connected to the controversy last week around the strike at a hospital in Gaza. Now, as a reminder, Hamas quickly put out that it was a strike carried out by the Israeli Defense Forces, and that strike killed upwards of 500 people. The IDF has since put out quite a bit of information disputing that, saying that from what they have seen and their evidence suggests that this was a failed rocket either launched by Hamas or the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. That is a topic covered in a previous video, but just as a note, that tends to be what it looks like to me. It looks like a failed rocket more than a deliberate Israeli strike. They included that over 1,000 Hamas terrorists have now been neutralized, including those in Israel following the October 7th terrorist attacks. Now, it's worth noting this is going to throw some question on the overall figures being reported throughout this war. So there were statistics shortly after the Hamas incursion into Israel saying that 1,500 Hamas terrorists had been killed and their bodies recovered in Israeli territory. Here we are 2 weeks later after thousands of strikes against Hamas targets all across Gaza, and the number now is decreased from that initial 1,500 to say over 1,000 Hamas terrorists have been killed. So, worth noting the difference in the body count, if you will. They added that dozens of senior leaders have been eliminated inside of Hamas, and the most recent name to that list is Mahmoud Sabi, who they say is an engineer and the unit head of Hamas's Projects and Development Department. That's an organization designed to source new technologies, things like drones and rockets, and bring them into Gaza from elsewhere in the Middle East. Now, the Gaza Ministry of Health put out that 4,385 Palestinians have now been killed in Gaza, which they say includes 1,756 children and 976 women, along with 13,561 injured. They also say that this number does not include the over 1,400 people missing under the rubble. The death toll continues to rise here. The injured number has jumped up pretty substantially in the last few days. And of course, worth noting that while this entity is listed as the Gaza Ministry of Health, it is essentially run by Hamas. And any of these statistics, any news reports coming out from Gaza agencies are run through and vetted by Hamas before they reach the public. Now, a little bit of good news in all of this. It's worth reporting. There were 2 hostages returned by Hamas to Israeli forces yesterday. It's the first since hostages were taken on October 7th. This was an American mother and her daughter. Hamas put out in a statement on their Telegram channel saying, in response to Qatari efforts, Al-Qassam Brigades released 2 American citizens, a mother and her daughter, for humanitarian reasons, and to prove to the American people and the world that the claims made by Biden and his fascist administration are false and baseless. So, who knows? Maybe they watched President Biden's address the other night. Big picture, worth noting that this is a terrorist organization that went in and murdered over 1,000 people in Israel, captured around 200 at gunpoint, have brought them back in and held them as hostages for 2 weeks. The release of 2 people is good. It does not erase or make right what Hamas has done up to this point, and there's no indication that we're going to see a continuous flow of hostages coming out. Now, it sounds like the reason for these hostages being released was to allow some humanitarian aid to come in. The recent reports are that 20 trucks of humanitarian aid have crossed from Egypt into Gaza through the Rafah crossing in the south. And it's worth noting that Israel has put out that they will not allow any humanitarian aid to cross their borders with Gaza until all Israeli hostages are returned. And of course, we're nowhere near that at this point. Now, news came out yesterday that American warship USS Carney intercepted missiles over the Red Sea fired by the Iranian-backed Houthi forces in Yemen that may have been headed towards Israel. There's more information has come out on that front, according to a U.S. official familiar with the situation. This was reported in CNN. They say that 4 cruise missiles and 15 drones were shot down over a period of 9 hours. So that was a pretty substantial engagement. Now, when we're looking at the drones here, these aren't the little quadcopter, recon-style drones. A lot of what Yemen has, what the Houthi forces have in their inventory, again, coming from Iran, or partially sourced from Iran at the very least. Think the Shahed 136 style long-range type loitering munition. In addition, reports came in that early Friday morning in Iraq, 2 rockets targeted the Baghdad Diplomatic Support Center near the airport, which houses U.S. military, diplomatic, and civilian personnel. So the attacks have continued against U.S. forces. Still no attribution as to who is responsible. The likely culprit here are Iranian-backed Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria, as these attacks have now taken place in northern Iraq, western Iraq, the Al-Tanf garrison in Syria, and now in Baghdad. Now, it's worth noting that the U.S. has not publicly attributed these attacks to any specific group, but historically, because this isn't the first time it's happened, right? U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria have previously come under attack by Iranian-backed militias. Historically, the U.S. has carried out retaliatory strikes against those groups in the immediate region. So as of this reporting, there's not any news of that, but it would not be surprising to see attacks carried out against those groups in the coming days. But that's all I've got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. 7 to 10 of the top stories each week, along with podcast recommendations. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.